welcome everybody to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger, and I have the pleasure of interviewing John Cheng, who is the founder and CEO of PlayAbly. John, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what does PlayAbly do?
Awesome. Well, JC, super excited to be here. We are a gamification platform for e-commerce companies. And what that means is we are building the fun back into shopping, right? So if you kind of look at where e-commerce has come, it really has kind of exploded because things like Shopify make it very easy to go online. The downside of that is obviously everything has become very transactional and that everyone's always trying to sell you something all the time. Whereas people on platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, where you're exploring, you're having fun, and then you end up on a site where it's like sell, 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 sell.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what we're trying to do is help those brand owners offer a customer experience that is more delightful, more interactive, and more fun. I'm sure we can dive into it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
really what we're talking about is gamification around the e-commerce space.
That's really cool. So, I mean, walk me through like an example, right? How about this? Do you work with like big brands or like
Yeah.
small individuals or both? I mean, kind of where's your bread and butter? And then what are a couple of really cool, maybe your favorite use cases?
Yeah, so we work with brands of all sizes, and in all different industries, and the reason for that is everybody plays games, right? And you might think of, oh, I'm not a teenage
My
boy,
ex-girlfriends tell me that too. Yeah.
but you know what? They probably played as well, right? You think teenage
Yeah,
boys playing games, but the Candy Crush, the number one audience for Candy Crush, fastest growing is women, middle-aged women, right?
okay.
And what we don't realize is everything about life is a game, right? Everything is variable rewards, everything's exploration and discovery. And so from that perspective, brands of all sizes have been able to take advantage of when you actually are able to engage somebody,
Mhm.
they're much more likely not only to buy, but remember your product and brands in a way that they never would with a static website. So the best example that we have that I love to share is like with Jones New York, which is a female fashion brand, but their target audience is 65 and older,
Okay.
right? And so when we went to them and they said, hey,
Like the classy Golden Girls kind of shop, right?
perfect,
All right,
exactly,
nailed it.
right? For
Nailed it.
anyone who still remembers that,
Blanche.
right? Yeah, Blanche Devereaux, right?
Yes.
So they came to us and said, hey, women are coming to our site, but they're bouncing within 3 seconds, and we
Hmm.
never have the chance to actually express to them. And we said, you know what? We need to make the site itself a destination rather than a place where you're selling things, right? So we actually used our AI platform to research their customers, research how they interact. And what we implemented was a pop-up that sits on the site and is a Cosmo quiz
Huh.
tied with a Tinder mechanic, right? So these women would land on the site and said, what's your denim personality? Swipe left or right on the
Oh,
jeans,
that's
right?
fun.
But the jeans would be the actual jeans from the catalog of Jones New
Yeah.
York. And so they're swiping left and right. And so every week you get your denim catalog, and we got 90 to 95% of the women, not just to play, but then to come back the next week for the cashmere quiz and stuff like that, right? So if you
Wow. Okay.
think about how compelling early Facebook was or how compelling BuzzFeed was early in the day, it's because it was interactive. It told you something about yourself, and you could have fun whether you bought something or not.
Yeah.
But the flip side is the women who play the game were 3 times more likely to buy something from Jones and York.
Yeah. What
And
did that do to their stick rate on the web? Because they were bouncing so early
yeah,
before. What was kind of the data on how
so
much longer they
great
stayed?
question. It cut their bounce rate in half,
Wow.
but it tripled the amount of time they spent on the site. And the most interesting metric that we found is your 5 week recall of that product and brand was up by 1,000%. A
Wow.
1,000%, right?
So
These
what did that
women,
result in like real dollars? So like did
yeah.
they report that back to you? Like is that something that you talk to clients about and get that so you can actually have good metrics?
So we track that for every client we work with, is how much direct revenue we're able to generate through this, how much incremental revenue. And that's our ground truth metric, but it's not the metric we start with. We start with engagement, right? We really start with, are we able to form an emotional connection with the brand?
Yeah.
Because once you're having fun, the sales part is easy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Once you identify with a brand and once you're like, hey, that is a brand that is fun and I identify with,
yeah,
you're going to make that purchase, whether it be today or when you're ready, you're going to make that purchase. And that brand is not going to have to spend millions of dollars on marketing trying to stay in front of you
yeah.
24/7. You're going to want to put yourself in front of the brand. So,
Yeah, Timu did really good at that. I
yeah,
remember they had like this spinning wheel, like a wheel of fortune thing for like whatever discount you were gonna
yeah,
get. It was just super
yeah,
interactive, and I thought that was brilliant. And you seem to be bringing that
yeah.
aspect to a lot of spot Shopify e-commerce stores.
So Timu is a great example. Like Timu is one of the models that we looked at. And what a lot of people don't know about Timu is that it was founded by a game designer, right? He
Oh,
actually had a game studio before he figured out, wow, these mechanics would really work well for an interactive shopping experience. And so it became the fastest growing, most adopted e-commerce platform in the world in 3 years by using exactly what you
yeah,
said. These game mechanics people love, and people go to Timu
yeah,
and play the games without ever buying something.
yeah.
And that's the hope and dream.
I think it's fascinating when someone comes from an unrelated industry and brings in their knowledge. It reminds me of the Jamaican bobsled team, right? Like,
Yes.
like you got John Candy recruiting sprinters in Jamaica because that's like the most important part, in his opinion, of the bobsled. And it was
Yes.
like it's like you take this completely unrelated but somewhat overlapping, right? And you bring it in there. And I think that's fascinating. I think some of the best things that have ever been innovated come from people that weren't from that industry,
That's
right?
right.
They bring something. So let me ask you about your creative process, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you mostly take suggestions from the clients, or do you have this whole process? You know, like the Harmon Brothers with their advertising, where like you go to this giant meetings,
Yeah.
extracting as much information as you can, and then having your whole team come up with these really crazy ideas. Like,
Yeah.
what is your madman process like here?
Yeah. I mean, to your point and to that nice reference to Cool Runnings,
Yeah,
we come from
that's
outside of
great.
e-commerce, right? We actually come from the video game space.
Hmm.
So our background is from a company called Unity, where
Oh,
60,
I'm
70,
very familiar with Unity.
okay, great. So
Yeah.
60, 70% of all mobile games are built on Unity.
Yeah.
And I used to run AI machine learning there.
Wow.
And the thing you might not know about Unity is we collected data on every single game that was out there. So every month we're looking at the play patterns of 2 to 3 billion people
Hmm.
with a B, right? And so we were really mapping what is it that people like to interact with who these people are. And so we've brought that same concept to e-commerce where different customer archetypes want a different type of interaction, right? So these older women, these golden girls at Jones, New York, they don't want something quick trigger. They don't want something, that takes a lot of reaction time. They want something that's fun and personality driven, right?
Sure.
And that all comes from our data and experience that we generated at Unity in developing these video games.
So you kind of
Um,
always have these templated structures of interactive games, and you can
yeah,
kind of say, well, this demographic is going to go more in
yeah.
this area. So we have 10 things to choose from there. Okay, yeah, that's really
So
cool.
we map demographics with
Uh-huh.
psychographics, right? So we
Yeah.
say, okay, these are older women, but they're explorers. Or, this middle-aged woman, she's fits this demographic, but she's a competitor,
Mhm.
right? So make sure there's a leaderboard, right? Or maybe she's a socialite. Let's
Yeah.
make sure she has invitations to give that she earns in the game to other people to bring them to the game, right? So we're changing not just the face of the customer journey, but also how you market around it, right? Every person should have a custom journey, let's call it,
Yeah.
that games are a perfect vehicle for delivery.
You know, you mentioned earlier that you really track the incremental or the like additional income.
Mhm.
Is that because you have like how is your compensation model? Do you because you have a baseline on them already, right?
That's right.
And because you're really good at increasing from that baseline to something else, do you do
Yeah.
like a revenue share on top kind of thing? Is because it kind of I was kind of getting that feeling. I'm like, hey, if you're tracking that, there might be a
Yeah.
really good reason other than just reporting, right?
That's exactly it, right? So we are rewarded, we are compensated, and our business model is predicated
Hmm.
on monetizing this additional engagement, right? So basically,
Sure,
how we're set up is um, based on how custom we want the game to be, there's a certain setup cost. But
sure.
then after that, every month, we're optimizing the game. We're keeping it fresh. We're putting in new promotions. We're putting in new products. We're keeping it like the analogy to video games is it used to be you spend $100 million developing a game, right? Then you
Yeah.
ship it out into the world and hope it works. Today with video games, you spend $10 million developing the game and $90 million operating it as a
Mm,
service, right? So Candy Crush today looks very different than it did 10 years ago because they're constantly keeping it live for people, right? And it's the same way with e-commerce where
yeah.
we're keeping this experience up to date in terms of the latest trends, the latest fashion, and keeping it something that people want to interact with, right?
Where do you sit in the debate of ethical gamification in the
Mm.
sense of addiction?
Yeah, that's a really interesting
Because I
question that
know it
we,
applies more to social media than it does buying stuff, but there
yeah,
are shopping addicts, for
yeah,
example. And not that it's your responsibility, but I am just curious where you personally and maybe the company, what is your ethos
yeah,
behind is there going too far? Is there a limit to where you say, yeah, we could do this, but that might actually harm the client or the customers? Or is it like, no, this actually, our data is actually, it looks fine. We're not worried. Just where
yeah.
do you fall in that? I'm curious.
It's it's really interesting because if you think about decomposing gamification,
Hmm.
it's really about behavioral economics, right? It's really around psychology. And to your points, that can be abused, right?
Yeah.
We
Sometimes accidentally, right? It's
something,
not
yeah,
always. I don't believe it's mostly malicious in any way,
sure.
but I'm just curious.
But it is something you're unlocking, right? And
Mhm.
our approach to it is our gamification is always very transparent to the end user, right?
Sure.
So we are putting the games instead of hidden psychological tricks, more of the dark arts. We're saying, hey, here's something fun that you can opt into and do if you so choose, right? I think where gamification goes wrong, if you look at casinos and things like that, the real
Yeah.
world impact of getting addicted to something like that is much different than going to Jones, New York twice or three times a week to play the game over and over again, right? So, I think we do operate at a level where the impact is limited on the downside,
Mhm.
but we are cognizant that if we see somebody coming back 5,000 times in a month, that, hey, maybe that's something we should work with the brand on to make sure that that's not something that happens long term.
Yeah. Is there any industries or products that you won't work with for either that reason or another reason?
It's interesting in that the initial adopters of our product were actually some of the more regulated industries, right?
Yeah.
So CBD or tobacco, some of the ones where really the marketing of those products has been limited by Facebook and everyone else,
Yeah.
obviously for governmental reasons, right? So
Yeah.
they have wanted ways to engage their customer base that is kind of off platform but true and authentic to themselves, right, in a very upfront and transparent manner. So um we don't work with any obviously any illegal products, but we
Yeah.
think that if a product has a unique audience that they need to find and address and service, we can be that bridge for them, and we're
Yeah. Okay.
we're
Yeah.
we're ready to work with them.
But I imagine if one came across your table, you're like, you might
Yeah,
put it to a vote. I feel like you
I mean,
never
a
know.
little black backstory on PlayAbly is that obviously it's some of your audience might know Unity went public,
Yeah.
right? And we had a really nice outcome as a team.
Mhm.
And this was during COVID, and we said, wow, a lot of our favorite brands are going out of business.
Yeah.
And we were seeing this, and we were like, they're getting crushed by marketing costs and those types of things. And we looked at it and we said, well, we know how to drive engagement and we've done it in the game space. We could actually do it for all the brands we love so that we're not, and it's not, not any dispersion on that, but we don't want to shop at Walmart and eat only at Applebee's the rest of our lives, right?
Sure.
We
Yeah.
really want to support these independent brands that have a unique message to their audience. So that's why we started PlayAbly,
Yeah.
was really to support these brands in a way that, like you said, from the outside, they would have never thought about or known to do, but is a much more cost effective and much more, personal, authentic way to market and
Yeah.
engage. And so that's why we started the company was we had the means and ability to work with brands that we wanted to.
And how
And
long have
that's
you
what
been
we do going forward.
how long have you been around?
We've been around 3 or 4 years. It took us about a year and a half to build the technology.
Okay.
And then we launched, early this year at NRF, and it's been a whirlwind since then.
That's awesome. Well, let's back up a little bit to that early
Sure.
company time. I always say on the podcast, it's never rainbows and unicorns, and I find something very disingenuous about social media where people and companies kind of only post the highlight reels of the stuff, and there's this tendency to look at how everyone's doing and thinking they're all doing great and I'm doing bad,
Yeah.
and I know that's not true. So talk to me about what were some of the early struggles that
Yeah.
you guys hit, and then maybe what are some of the current ones that you're just trying to battle through right now?
Yeah. I mean, it has not been easy, and it continues to be something that we grind at every single day. Because as part of a lot of how we like to talk about it is, we're not just selling a religion, but we're also selling the Bibles that go along with it. In that,
Yeah,
when we say, "Hey, you need to use gamification in your brand," people are like, "What are you talking about?" Right?
yeah.
I need, I need a checkout cart. I need this. I don't need a game. Right. So
Mhm.
we're trying to espouse something they've never heard of and then sell them a product to actually
You got
accomplish
to
that.
educate them about it
Right.
before, yeah, and that could be a problem with a lot of companies. Some companies have something that's so good, but remember, being first isn't easy,
It can
or
be painful.
or leading is painful because it's like, yeah, you have an additional onus on
Yeah.
you. You have to actually educate them about why this is even great, and then you have to give them the great thing afterward.
And that's where we struggled at the start is we went after the entire vision rather than breaking it down into a piece that mattered to people today, right?
Mhm.
So, we had this entire vision, as you kind of alluded to, like if like that Timo environment where there's lots of products and there's an entire kind of experience around it. The brands just weren't ready for it. When we started pitching that, that was something that just fell, you know, flat on your face, right?
Yeah.
And so what we had to like find something that resonated and people were really excited to actually adopt. And that took us a long time. We had to circumnavigate and like we pointed out, we were from outside of e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have the same
You got a learning
connections.
curve also. Like you can't.
Absolutely.
That's the downside. Is well,
Yeah.
how about this? Did you bring on someone early that did had a ton of that knowledge? Because I mean, coming in
Yes.
from the outside is great and all, but there's a learning curve, right?
And I think for me personally, right? So we did bring on brand managers who had managed their own e-commerce stores, but as CEO, as somebody who had run my previous startup in the game space, you come with a certain preconceived notion or understanding of the world that 6 months in gets thrown completely on your
Hey,
head and
everyone's
go
got a plan until they get punched in the face,
and
right?
you go, I don't know anything. I've got to learn everything from the ground up. And that was a personal struggle
Hmm.
that turned out to be one of the most rewarding things. Because, I mean, to back up even further, I went into the gaming space from investment banking, from Wall Street,
Yeah,
right? So from Wall Street, where it's like, how do we make the most money out of the least investment, ROI, blah, 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 blah. That's what matters to the game space where I'm telling a story. This is
hmm,
art. My game is done when it's done. That's why you see some
yeah,
of these video franchises, 10 years later, still not launching. It's because the artist behind it isn't ready. And
sure.
I went in there saying, hey, I can help you make more money. They would say, that's the last thing I care about. And so after 10 years in that industry, I'd gotten into this mindset where it's about the art. And then you go into e-commerce where it's kind
Very
of a
much about
blend of the
revenue.
two, but
Yeah,
it's about the revenue
revenue.
that really
Yeah,
matters. And
you're
I'm just
just
like,
back to the original money part. Yeah, like okay, fine, here we are.
it
Yeah,
took me a while to figure that out again, where it's
yeah,
like, and to be honest, I don't think it should be like that, right? I don't think that is to the brand's benefit in the long term either, right? So a
sure.
lot of what we do is try and pull them away from day one ROI to look at how these customers are now identifying with your brand, right? Look at
Yeah.
how often they're coming back on their own. Look at how what they're talking about on social media. Not because we can't generate immediate returns, but because we think ultimately that relationship is going to be what takes the brands to a level they haven't
I
seen
mean,
before versus like a 10% increase in revenue.
yeah, that's usually something that only the bigger brands understand.
Yeah.
It's kind of like small banks versus big banks when it comes to mortgages. Like small banks will only do so many because, like floating that much money that long term is not easy, whereas the big banks can do that.
Hmm.
Like Nike can do what you're talking about. They
That's right.
understand the 20-year plan. They get it,
Yeah.
right? But it's not super common, and it is hard to pitch a small business owner with a
Yeah.
Shopify account on this. Oh no, look at 3 years from now, and they're like, buddy, I don't know if I'm in business 3 months from now
That's
with these
exactly it.
with tariffs and just and whatever is going to happen. That's
Yeah.
very unpredictable. Actually, that brings me to my next question though.
Yeah.
How does your pitch change with the current climate of tariffs, whether they're
Yeah.
on, they're off, they're
Yeah.
30%, they're 10%, and then whatever is then going to end up happening after we record this podcast, who knows? Because it does change the math.
It does.
Does this go in your favor? And you're like, listen, it's hard out there. If you're going to make it, you're going to have to do something innovative, or like, what do you tell them?
That that is exactly the bucket that we ended up in, which is you have to do something different because everybody is scared, right?
Yeah,
You have to do something different because your customers are weary, right?
yeah.
The
Like
way that
supply
we
chain
put
won't fix this completely, right?
right, the way we position it today is the traffic that you have, the customers you have are the most valuable asset that you have, right?
Mhm.
If you're going to make one investment, make an investment in keeping your customers happy because trying to acquire a new one in this economy is next to impossible, right?
Yeah,
But if you can get your customers more aligned with what you're doing and frankly spending more, that is the most valuable thing you can do for your business today, right? And the way to
yeah,
do that is not buy, 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 buy.
yeah,
It's actually how can we fulfill needs that you didn't even know you had, right?
yeah,
How can we engage you in a way that, like every person has those 3 to 5, 10 brands that they identify with that are who they are.
yeah.
How can you work yourself into that and become one of those brands and beloved by a specific community?
Yeah, and that's it's you hit on a great point, the beloved part, right? What I think one of the factors that gets some companies through the really hard times when an industry gets just completely nailed is that beloved part. It's that brand loyalty to it. It's them. It's Here's how you know you have a great brand. When If you tell people we might go out of business and they
Yeah.
go, the hell you are, and they start, one of those social media
Yeah.
campaigns like, let's keep these guys, like that's when you know you've done
Yeah.
something right. And creating that experience over
Yeah.
time, like you were saying, really helps people identify and lock in, and they'll defend you. They'll spend more money
Yeah.
with you because remember, most people you're going to spend based. We want to spend as least amount for the most amount of stuff, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
how we are. I get that, but there is a line
Yeah.
that if you are loyal enough, you will now start to small sacrifices because you don't want to see that go away, whether it be by
Absolutely.
principle, whether it be just
Yeah.
because it's like, no, that's my favorite. Like one of the women might say, the only jeans that fit me right are these guys. I can't let them go out of business. What am
That's
I
right.
gonna do? Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it shapes my hips perfectly. Like they
Yeah.
can't go out of business. So, but that's why I think that's a big point that you draw on, which is that beloved nature,
Yeah.
how you get from just being commoditized to evangelized, right?
And there's only probably 3 to 5 brands that a person at the most is going to feel that way about,
Yeah,
right?
true.
And for you
Totally.
to earn yourself into that upper
Yeah.
echelon of relationships
Yeah.
requires an authenticity
Yes.
that a transactional relationship will never deliver, right? And no matter how many emails you send them or how many discounts you give them,
Yeah.
if you don't listen, adapt, and frankly entertain,
Hmm.
there's so much noise in the world, right? There's so much going on. There's so many pressures and different inputs. They're going to forget about you, right?
Yeah.
And how do you stay top of mind and how do you stay relevant and how do you stay really listening is it's all about engagement, interactivity, right? It's why, even though retail is difficult today, the best retail experiences are still the best that you'll ever have. Like that salesperson that when you come in and goes, "Oh, I knew you'd come in with your daughter, so I picked, 2 outfits that I know you're gonna love."
Mhm.
I mean, that
Blows your
shopper's
mind.
never going anywhere else,
I
right?
was talking to someone else the other day. It was an interview. We were talking about bringing the Vegas customer service experience
Mm,
to a small business, right?
yeah,
Vegas, I mean, like what you just said there, that Vegas is like the place in the world that collects so much data and
yeah,
curates,
yeah,
the best of their ability. They'll curate. Listen, like to them, I'm a nobody, but even they still have data of when I've gone, and
yeah,
I still get very specific emails and texts
yeah,
that are about what I
yeah,
did when I was there. And listen, I'm not gonna lie, I've been in marketing 25 years. I know the game. It
right.
doesn't change the fact that it feels good.
Yes.
Right? Like
Yep, yep.
I literally can look behind the curtain. I see the
Yeah.
wizard and I'm just like,
And it's
I
still,
still like it. I
and it
still
still
like
feels
it.
good. Like to your point, it still feels good,
It does
right?
still feel good, right? But let's talk about you guys now because you make great points about how you help with other businesses. How are you helping yourself? So how do you market you guys? Like if I go to your website, is there a game? There better be a game.
There is a whole, I think the game that we have today is a duck hunt game,
Mm,
retro NES,
love Duck Hunt, man. Loved it.
where you got to shoot the targets and earn a discount. So
Okay.
the way we market is almost entirely organic, which is, dog food in our own product, which is as brands adopt our games,
Hmm.
there's a powered by PlayAbly at the bottom.
Okay. Yeah.
Most of our new customers come from brands who see that, click on it, end up on our page, play a
That's
couple of
brilliant.
the
Yeah.
of our stores games,
Hmm.
sign up, and I meet with every new client myself.
Nice.
It's just something that we're still, and I hope we'll always be in listening mode, in
Yeah.
learning mode, and I want to hear what their problems are. And the number one question we ask, as how we design the game is like, what is the one thing that you wish every new customer knew after they left the site, right? What is the one thing that if they understood that you would have the formation of a relationship? It could be, hey, we, made in the USA, more organic than any of our competitors. It could be, you know, this is something my granddaughters loves because it's the hottest thing. It could just one simple fact, and we can build that into that game experience in a way that no pop-up or no email or no picture is ever gonna do. And that changes the trajectory of many of these brand relationships because it's the thing the founder always has wanted to convey and just hasn't had a vehicle to do that. And that's what we're hoping to be. We're hoping to be that vehicle for them to share their vision.
So you do a lot of that referral marketing through like you said, having your own kind of clickable logo in there. Um, Referral marketing is good, but it's not like super scalable, right? At
Yeah.
a certain pace. So I guess my question is really, what are your goals for your own scale, and are you doing anything outside of that referral kind of style? Oh, you're on the podcast, okay, PR check, but is there any other types of marketing outbound, or like what are you doing to scale, or maybe you don't want to scale fast? I don't know, like what where you at?
We're not looking, and happy to talk about where this ends up in a couple of years, but for right now, we're looking to scale systematically, in which we really understand our customer base incredibly well. I think the one thing that has surprised us in its effectiveness as a marketing channel, which I'll admit I was reticent to, is conferences.
Okay,
We actually go to quite a few e-commerce conferences initially just to learn,
sure.
but those conversations turned into customers, right? And so NRF, Shop Talk, the Lead, they have all been, and I think it kind of speaks to how we're made up as a company. We just actually love interacting with people, right? So the opportunity to speak to these people in real life, analogous to our product, which is trying to deliver that digitally, has been a way to drive outside of referrals, has been the second most important marketing channel for us. Is we'll come back from every conference with over 100 different, brand
Wow.
prospects, right? And
Okay.
it's just conversation after conversation because frankly, no one else is doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So the word kind of spreads when at a conference. They're like, oh, have you talked to the game? They like built this game.
Yeah.
And then typically we'll build a game for that conference, right? Which is where the duck hunt one comes from. It's like
I like the
if you
duck hunt
if you
idea.
score this amount of things, then you get this, and they'll come and find us, right? So we won't even have a booth. We're just going to hang out there, and we'll end up talking to people. So I take your point. Eventually, yes,
Yeah.
it's going to be paid marketing, SEO, all those kinds of good things.
But you seem to be doing pretty well with where you're at right now, right? And it also gives you a little bit of room to figure out what you're
We
going.
need a little room to still figure things out, right?
Yeah, yeah, because you can collapse under the weight of your own sales.
Yeah,
It's 100% possible. So like the operations and the system has to be there. That structure, that foundation has to be strong.
we are very sensitive of not becoming a sales-driven organization, but more a
Yeah,
product-driven organization, right?
good.
Like we
Very
want to
good.
be a customer-driven organization, and like like we said previously, like we're still spreading the religion, right?
Yeah,
Like we're still trying to explain to people what this is,
yeah,
and that is not an easy process when everyone else is in a very different mindset, where it's like, oh, how can I deliver the discount the fastest?
yeah.
When you're saying don't do that, the reaction often is like, oh, what are you talking about? And so we got to work through that. And that
Have you
takes
have you
time.
thought of doing the Mormon method where you just go door to door and
Door
say,
to door.
"Excuse me, sir, would you like to hear about the gamification method and how it can make your life better?" Okay. You brought in religion. So, I mean your 12-month goals. If we had this podcast
Yeah,
talk again, um and in respect to doing it at a certain pace that's comfortable for you guys,
yeah,
where do you want to be in your growth in 12 months though?
yeah,
Like percentage wise, let's say from where you're at now. If you want to give revenue numbers, you can. You don't have to. We can do.
yeah.
I'm just curious. Like, do you guys want to double, triple, quadruple, or is that too fast? Too
We
in
are
12 months?
looking to triple the size of our network over the next 12 months for
Okay.
a very specific reason, right?
Let's hear it.
Um, we really believe in a future where entertainment and shopping are coming together, right? Where if you look at today, games have overtaken movies, a couple of years ago in terms of total revenue, right? And if you look at, a lot of malls suffering, that actual shopping experience needs to be replicated somewhere, and we think it'll be online. And we think, if we can drive that together in a way, um, through a network of these games across different brands, right? So if you look at, I guess going back to Unity, we used our games to develop an ad network called Unity Ads that last year I think did $4 billion in revenue, right? Which sounds decent, but compared to Facebook and Google is, kind of a drop in the bucket.
Sure.
But the way we were able to compete was every one of those ads was playable, interactive, incentivized, right? And people love that. And in the video game space, Unity ads is the number one way that you get new customers.
Yeah.
We want to make that happen in the e-commerce space as well, where, these games that we're building for brands will become ads themselves and post on social media or within emails. And that, you'll be able to play them anywhere, not necessarily on the brand site, right? Like you could be on your phone and, over time, we would love to build a destination to your point around Temu, which I thought was super astute.
Yeah.
You could go to one place and earn real world product and rewards and play these different games, get to know these different brands, all in a singular
Like a little
destination,
marketplace for it. I
a
see where you're going
marketplace.
with that.
That's where we think this goes,
Okay.
right? That's where
Well,
we
see,
see.
that was going to be my next question. Like,
Yeah,
not just where do you see you guys, but like where do you see the industry or the technology?
yeah,
Do you see other than marketplace is a great vision, right?
right.
What else do you see where the tech? It might not even be you guys, it might be someone else,
Yeah.
bigger company that brings it in. But where do you see this tech going in a few years?
We see it really driving personalization at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? Like we think every person is a combination of different demographics, psychographics, different behavioral cues, different parts of the customer journey. All that should be personalized, right? All of that should be, okay, I'm not ready to buy today, but I am the perfect customer. So, the things and what I see and how I see it. It's just like when IDFA was deprecated on iOS with ads, and everyone's like, we don't want, we don't want any data to leak out.
Yeah.
But actually, the more personal the ad is, it's actually better for you, right? Like rather than me seeing, I don't know, women's wear gear, like I actually see things that matter to me, right?
Mm,
So same way with the e-commerce processes, it should be personalized. But the only way to learn about people, the
mhm,
only way to actually personalize them is to authentically interact and learn about them. And we have seen, and we truly believe our vision is like games are the way to do that. Whether they be lightweight games or deeper games, you reveal so much about yourself,
mhm.
how competitive you are, how risk averse you are, whatever it might be, in a way that nothing else, no survey, no click tracking would ever show you, right? So if we're able to be the central kind of repository for that information platform, I think a lot of vendors could use that to personalize different parts of the e-commerce journey, right? And so really, if we can be the unlock to getting people to engage, we can then shape a profile about them that gives them the best experience, right? We really have to work from the customer on out, like what's best for them, rather than a generic like 15% discount you landed on the site. Like, take me through, oh, you're a mom, let's make sure that everything we show you is biodegradable, all the things that would give you a better experience. We could
Yeah.
do that through engagement.
I love that. Let me ask you a question. So, because I'm going to remove your company from this
Of course.
question.
Yeah.
The question is, other than the advice of gamify your site, you
Hmm.
deal with so many e-commerce brands, and I say e-commerce brands, it's really
Yeah.
any brand that sells online, which is not, Nike isn't an e-commerce brand, but they just have an e-commerce wing. So anyone who is selling their product online, other than the advice, obviously,
Hmm.
of hey, try gamification, it can help.
Yeah.
What have you work with so many? What have you
Yeah.
seen where what additional advice would you give beyond that to either a brand who is just starting to do e-commerce or one
Yeah.
that is pure e-commerce? What else can they do other than
Yeah.
this that helps?
The thing that we see and the thing that is hardest to convince these brands of, especially the brand owners, is that at some point the brand grows beyond the founder, in that the founder or the owner being the customer, right?
Yeah.
In order to actually grow, in order to expand beyond a niche, at some point the owner is no longer the ideal customer archetype, right?
Yeah.
But they continue to make decisions as if they were, right?
It's a good
And
point.
so I think the most important thing that we've seen, and this inflection point could be 5 million or 25 million a year, somewhere in that range,
Yeah.
where you've got to start going after different customer segments, is to really invest through gamification or otherwise, the ability to understand who these people are, right? And to wrap your mind around they might want and make very different decisions than you would as the person who's brought this incredible brand to a great launching point, right?
Mhm.
To build a $10 million a year brand is no small feat.
Yeah.
But to get from 10 to 100,
Yeah.
that's probably not only selling to people like you anymore,
Yeah.
right?
It takes a different thought process. You got to bring more
Yeah.
people in at the top a little bit too.
Yeah, you've got to
Yeah.
really expand your idea of what it means to serve your customer base. And we've seen that most effective when they really understand all the different personas and they're really able to your point, put different people in place to serve those different personas who, if I'm Jones, New York, and suddenly a younger audience is there, maybe the CEO who's 65 isn't the right person to be making those merchandising decisions for that other group,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, one of the best examples I've seen of that, someone who probably took that advice early, was New Balance. I don't
Sure.
know if you've seen the brand turnaround.
Yeah.
New Balance and then also Champions.
Yeah. New
My
Balance, especially in Japan.
Yeah.
Holy cow, the people who
So
wear
like
them, I was like,
New Balance
whoa.
and Champions were like old man brands,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, like dads wore the New Balance and Champions was like again, that was older demographic. And listen, they were
Right.
nailing it in that demographic. One day, my daughter's 19 right now. She's in college. And when she was like 16 or 17, she out of nowhere was like, Dad, we're at the mall. And she wanted to go into the Champion store. And I was like, okay. She's like, oh my God. And she's like, oh my God, they have this one. And I was like,
Yeah.
you know this brand? She's like, yeah,
Right.
all my friends do. And it dawned on me that someone was like, listen, our demographic is gonna die soon.
Right.
Like, and they didn't go like one step down. They went all the way down.
Yeah.
They said, no, we got to go after a generation that's never heard of us.
Yeah. We got
Right?
to skip a couple generations.
Yeah, they had to skip a couple of generations, and they did, and they nailed it. And
Yeah.
here's the thing: they didn't just nail it; they like doubled and tripled their prices, and the kids were just buying them off the racks. They did not care, and so they whatever rebranding they did at that level was brilliant. But to your point, someone eventually realized if we're gonna either survive for one or
Yeah.
get even bigger, we have to realize that we have to create a new demographic that is not us, which
Yeah.
means there's no way that someone at the top was like, "Oh, let's target 13-year-olds."
Right,
Like that
right.
what there's no way. They
No
brought
way.
in someone who
Yeah,
was young who said, "No, you don't understand. This will work."
yeah.
And they listened to them. They rolled the dice and they nailed it. And they added like a capital B billions more to their revenue. And I thought that was one of the most brilliant case studies
Yeah.
of brand survival I've ever seen.
And that's what more brands need to do, right?
Yeah.
They need to step outside of their comfort zone
Yeah.
and really start to do the work, whether it be to bring someone or the research themselves of who else could and should love their product.
Yeah.
Because it's often much broader than what they currently think it is.
John, this has been absolutely fascinating. If there's someone who's listening who either wants to be a client or wants to a high level big pitch deal with you personally, where can people find you personally, and then where can they find the company?
Yeah, so the only social I'm really active on is LinkedIn. So
Okay.
John Cheng on for LinkedIn. But for the company and for anyone who wants to just even chat, playably.ai. There's a Calendly. My Calendly link is on there. You set up a meeting.
Mhm.
We'll just chat for 30 minutes.
But only
I,
after they play the game. After they play .com, then they
if
can.
you can get past level 2, then you get the Calendly link. That is
That should be the way you unlock the ability to talk to you. It's like you don't even get to be a guest unless you can make it to level 2, okay? And then it automatically
we
unlocks.
will
That would be
supply
cool.
you a game for your podcast.
Hey, that would
Absolutely.
be cool. I wonder what a game would look like for my podcast. That'd be kind of fun.
I'll connect you with the team. We'll think of something.
We'll talk. And listen, for everyone else out there who's listening, thank you again so much for listening to another episode
Awesome.
of the Future of BizTech. Hey, if you like it, give it a 5-star rating, share it with your friends because that is how tech nerds like us can find cool podcasts like this. Listen, John, thank you again so much for being on the show. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about maybe a possible gamification of the future of BizTech.
Awesome. Thanks, JC.
Have a good one.